Welcome to From Shadows to the Block, a collection where the characters don't just exist, they breathe, they fight, and they survive. If they're lucky. The Tell, a short story by Brian Eldridge Sr. 2026. It's good to see you, baby, Mike said, his arms wrapped tight around Angie. He squeezed her a moment more before letting her go with a smile. You too, Mikey, she said, stepping out of the way to let Mike come into the house. He took off his White Sox hat as he walked into the living room and looked around. It had been almost a year since he'd been to Corey and Angie's house, Corey's 30th birthday party. The 50-inch flat screen gripped the slate rock walls like a prayer to God. Two large oak bookshelves lined the walls, packed from top to bottom with black authors. Spines by Michelle Alexander, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and bell hooks. Mike breathed in deeply. The smell of Angie's hood-famous chicken wings glided through the air. No doubt she had some baby shower meatballs in the crock pot and some kind of 6 or 8 layer dip. She did it up whenever Corey had friends over. Mike walked to the dark wood mantel settled above the fireplace like a steady awning. The mantel was lined with family pictures. Corey and Angie's wedding, where he was the best man. Their twin daughters, Keena and Sheena. Mike sighed, slightly miffed. What up, nigga? Mike heard from behind him. He turned to see Corey approaching with his arms held out for a hug. Behind Corey was his brother-in-law, Tyler. The two men embraced in a heavy bro hug. Mike buried his fist firmly into Corey's back. Mike grinned hard, his smile beaming through the room. Look at this nigga, Mike said, moving on to hug Tyler. Tyler's eyes were tight, but widened as Mike approached. He wrapped his arms around Mike and gave him a quick hug and a tight smile. The slightly sweet but pungent smell of Tyler's breath touched Mike's nose. Good to see you, Mikey, Tyler said. Mike gave him a quick smile and backed away, still taking in the arrangement of the living room. Angie walked in and wrapped her arm around her older brother's waist. She smiled at Corey and Mike before giving Tyler a light squeeze. Food is almost ready, boys. Where's Frenchie? Tyler stared at the door briefly and then down at his sister. He on CP time, he'll be here, Corey said. They walked through the house to get to Corey's man cave. Corey's den had 2 brown leather recliners and a matching love seat. In the back of the room was a pool table, a serving table, and a card table. Corey's collection of University of Kentucky memorabilia decorated the room. A fully stocked refrigerator and another flat screen, 60-inch, completed the room's aesthetic. This blue burning my eyes, my guy, Mike laughed, putting his hands on Corey's shoulders. Ty, you went to Indiana. Don't this shit make you ill? Tyler chuckled a little and grabbed an MGD from the ice bucket. It's nothing I decorate my house with, he said. Good thing this ain't y'all shit, Corey laughed, flopping down into the recliner and grabbing his tumbler of bourbon. How long you gonna be here, Ty? Mike asked, sitting in the other recliner. You don't get down here much. Tyler padded across the room and laid down on the love seat, clumsily reaching over to put his beer on the coffee table. I'm leaving tomorrow, probably, Tyler said. How are the twins? Mike asked. Corey took another sip of his bourbon. He smiled, his face lighting up with pride. Man, I can't even explain it. They are 3 going on 13. We blessed. We worked hard to get pregnant. Mike gave a tight smile and leaned forward, clasping his hands together. He remembered talking to Corey about the fertility issues they were having. They were just about to throw in the towel and consider adoption when Angie found out she was expecting. That's dope, bro. Not much more important than leaving a legacy. That's real talk, Mike said. Tyler sat up and took his beer to the head. A painful burp escaped his throat. He put his hand on his chest. Ugh, that one hurt, Tyler said, still holding his chest. Corey and Mike burst out laughing. Tyler's face was flushed red and his eyes were watering. Tyler wasn't a big drinker, but he had had more than his normal share since being back in Hopkinsville for the funeral. Corey could see the stress on Tyler's face. They had all grown up together, and even though time and life had sent them all in various directions, they still knew each other and could usually read each other like a Walter Mosley novel. "What's up with you, bro?" Corey asked, watching Tyler's scrunched up face. The doorbell rang before Tyler could answer. "What kind of music you got, Corey? I'm not trying to listen to no Gap Band or Jeffrey Osborne," Tyler said, changing the subject. Corey sucked his teeth. He swirled the ice in his tumbler and took the remote from the coffee table and turned on George Duke's Rhyme or Reason. "Y'all don't know shit about real music," Corey said as Tyler and Mike cackled. "Oh shit. Sometimes love has no rhyme or no reason even when you try to be cool," French sang off key, entering the room, his hands in the air. "My nigga," Mike said, getting up and hugging French. "Good to see you." Tyler climbed off the floor and followed Corey over, and they all took turns greeting their friend. Tyler was the last one to hug French. When he began to let go, his hand slowly slid down to the small of his back, where he felt something bulgy and hard. "Whoa," Tyler said, stepping back. "Why is this nigga packing a gun? Can he even legally carry one? My sister and nieces are in the house. Is Corey cool with this?" French put his hand over his mouth and his other hand behind his back. "My bad," he said. "Corey, I can take it to the car. The girl's home?" Corey shook his head and waved him off. "You good, French. Just make sure the safety is on," he said, taking another sip from his drink. French stomped over to the bar and made himself 2 fingers of bourbon and grabbed the bottle and carried it to the coffee table. When he sat down beside Tyler, he tied his black-on-black Jordan ones. His chain dangled in front of him, the oversized F charm swaying back and forth. "So, Howard," French said, sitting back. "Long live that nigga." French took his drink to the head, feeling the burn flow down his throat and warm his belly. "For life," Mike said, taking a sip of his drink. "Yeah," Tyler said softly, his voice raspy. Corey took a deep breath before a smile set on his lips. "You remember when them dudes from Bowling Green tried to tackle him during the playoffs?" Corey said, beginning to chuckle. Mike clapped, his laugh now filling the space. "Bro," he started. "Homie ran through 3 dudes. The last dude got dragged 5 yards before Howard ran out his goddamn jersey." Mike and Corey slapped 5 over and over, laughing at the memory. French's smile flashed but didn't reach his eyes. Tyler put his hands on his head, surprised by the story. "So he ran out of his jersey? They tore it off?" Tyler asked. "You can do a lot when you're determined," French said, pouring another 2 fingers. Corey looked at French, his brow furrowed. "Slow down on that hooch, nigga. Angie about to bring in the food." French laughed coldly, nearly a cough. "Pour me one?" Tyler asked, holding his hand up. Corey stared at Tyler and grinned. Mike held still, one eye squinted, looking at Tyler. French got up and walked over to the bar, grabbing another heavy glass tumbler. He slid it over in front of Tyler and poured him a shot. "You get a baby dose. Children's Tylenol ass nigga." He laughed. The men burst into laughter as Angie walked in with the large serving tray containing the chicken wings, 6-layer dip, tortilla chips, and meatballs. She walked over behind Corey and put her hands on his shoulders. "Y'all food here? You need anything else?" she asked. Mike turned and looked back at her and then at the food. He lightly licked his lips. "We good, baby," Corey said as she gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Angie turned to walk away and Corey gave her a light swat on her butt. "If you don't stop," she threatened jokingly, exiting the room. "That's a bad French started. Tyler frowned, staring darts at French. Corey held his bourbon at his lips. "You got a good woman, Corey," French said, course correcting. Uh-huh, Corey said, a low laugh escaping. Mike sat back, his thumbnail in his mouth for a second. He slapped his hands on his thighs and then stood up. I'm finna eat. My stomach touching my back right about now, he joked. Once they had all made their plates, they sat around the coffee table reminiscing on their adolescence and on how Howard had impacted their lives. I wanted to be like him, just not the bad habits, Corey said. Like the way he could play basketball, baseball, and be all state in football. Whew. His bad habits is what made him famous, French cut in. The only one more connected to Clemens in the state might be OG. Mike put his cup down and groaned. Your hero, he mocked. French glared at Mike briefly before turning his attention back to Corey. Look, Howard had bread. He had hoes. He had cars. He had a gang of kids he didn't claim, Corey interrupted. Tyler softly cleared his throat while giving French a passing glance. He had kids? How many? Tyler asked. French sucked his teeth. Mike clapped his hands and spoke freely. Man, that nigga had 3 or 4 that we pretty much guarantee are his. Word is he had some out-of-town kids up in Louisville, and one chick in Nashville said he was her son's father. Corey shook his head. Damn shame. And did he really do anything for them? French shoved a flat chicken wing into his mouth and pulled out the bone. He chewed loudly before speaking. They knew what they was getting into when they messed with a brother like Howard. Ain't no love in these streets. Mike pointed at French with a tortilla chip. It's one thing to lay one down. It's a whole other thing to leave her with a baby to raise, Mike said, his face warming up with frustration. French scoffed, his shoulders jerking with a soft laugh. He didn't look at Mike. He just scooped some dip from his plate. Tyler felt a tingle in his legs and hands. There were words on the tip of his tongue that he wanted to say, but he kept them in. He was about to stand up when Corey started speaking again. Mike, all due respect. You my best friend. My man since yay high, he said, holding his hand flat 3 feet off the ground. But you can't speak on dudes disrespecting women. French coughed, choking on the dip. He covered his mouth and grabbed for his drink. Tyler stood up and excused himself. I'll be back, he said softly, patting towards the bathroom. Don't throw up Tylenol, French said through his coughs. Mike frowned at Corey. His fists clenched briefly, and he rubbed his hands together before pushing his food away. It's like that, bro. Corey bent over the side of the recliner towards Mike, his words slightly slurred. How many you take down from our graduating class? French, now recovered from his coughing fit, cut in. 3 or 4 while we were in high school. Pretty ass nigga, he said, a bitter grin on his face. Mike sighed and then leaned back, steepling his fingers. 2 while we were in high school. Like 3 since, he said, mentally making notes. Corey moved in closer. Mike could smell the bourbon, the fermented scent crossing the invisible boundary between them. And did you use protection? You definitely took that bad habit from Howard, he said, staring solemnly at Mike. Mike shifted in his seat. He looked at French. French's face wore a wide smile that actually looked amused this time. He turned and looked back towards the doorway, hoping Tyler would come in and interrupt this line of questioning. Master P and Young Bleed asked how you do that there over the speakers. Man, I make no excuses for what I did, he said softly, matching Corey's lean. And I still enjoy the company of several women. Corey exhaled sharply and stared for another moment before a smile parted his lips. I'm just fucking with you, Corey said. You had little girls on your ass since we was playing junior pro. Tyler came back in. His collar was darker. His whole face was wet. The alcohol was coming through his pores, and his anxiety was elevated. Bro, Corey said, staring at Tyler. You sweating? Tyler flopped onto the couch and grabbed a chicken wing. Nah, just wash my face. You let the liquor win, French cut in. You gotta let it build that fire in your gut. The men all shared a quick laugh before silence fell over the room. Tyler watched all three men. He saw French's gun protruding out from behind him, hanging on his waistband. He looked at Mike, who seemed to be deep in thought. His eyes crossed over to Corey, who was now on his third bourbon. Howard had kids he didn't take care of, but he looked out for me. How's work, Ty? Corey asked, his eyes closed and his head leaned back in the recliner. Tyler slowly scooted forward, his hands clasped. He could feel his cold, wet collar touching his warm neck. It's going. We got a big thing coming up. Client going against the DOJ. That's why I gotta get back. Opening statements are on Monday, he said. In English, French grunted. I gotta be in court Monday to defend my client against the feds, he said, a grin crossing his face. Mike had retaken his plate by now and was chewing on a dry tortilla chip. How often you got cases? Mike asked. Tyler was still new to the firm. He had only been out of law school for 2 years, so this was actually the first time he was in a courtroom, at the table. This is my first case. I'm second chair, he said. Elaborate, French said, his hands moving in circles with his chicken wing in tow. It means I don't have to make the argument. I'm just helping with the defense. I'm like the second attorney on the case, he said. Mike leaned across the table and slapped 5 with Tyler. He smiled with pride. Congrats, Ty. That's good shit, he said. How much law school cost? French asked, cutting his eyes at Tyler before looking over to Corey. Corey's eyes were closed and his forearm rested over his forehead. Tyler looked at his hands and closed his eyes, considering how much money it cost to get his law degree from Maurer at Indiana University. Just on law school, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000, Tyler said softly. Corey removed his arm from his face and sat up. French gave a dry laugh. Mike leaned forward, his lips puckered out in shock. God damn, Mike said. Corey shook his head. He didn't realize just how much his brother-in-law had spent for college. We might need to send you cash instead of gifts for your birthday, Corey laughed. Tyler gave a soft grin and dropped back. Student loans gotta be killing your pocket, Mike said. It's paid off, he said softly, turning his head towards the muted TV where Stephen A. Smith was bumping his gums. Corey leaned in again, holding his 4th bourbon to his lips. He lowered it to the table and squinted. Hold up. Paid off? You out here stripping? Mike laughed. French and Mike slapped 5 and laughed while Corey's face bore a look of concern. This was news to him. This nigga turning tricks? We thought you was bad, Mike. Tyler a master gigolo in Naptown. French laughed. Corey's fists both tightened. He knew that Tyler and Angie's parents didn't have the money to pay off that kind of debt. The money he and Angie made wasn't nearly enough. Something was up. Yo, wait. For real? How you paid off hundreds of thousands in student loans in like 2 years? Corey barked. Mike and French both stopped talking. They recognized the look of concern on Corey's face. Mike turned his attention to Tyler, who was avoiding Corey's stare. French stood up and walked to the bar, grabbing a bottle of water. He posted up on the bar, his face expressionless. Tyler's hand covered his mouth and his knee bounced up and down. His heart rate and his breath were increasing. Corey slapped his hand on the table, causing their plates to jump and the ice in their tumblers to clink. Your parents put up the house? Corey inquired, his voice escalating. Tyler looked at Corey and uncovered his mouth. His bottom lip trembled, and he slowly let the single word fall out like a plunge from the roof. Howard, he said in nearly a whisper. Corey bit his bottom lip so hard he could taste copper. He stood up and pointed at Mike and French. Y'all gotta bounce for a minute, he snapped. Family business. Mike stood, his eyes wide and his hands held up in surrender, backed out of the room. French followed behind with a slow strut. He turned and looked at Tyler. Their eyes met for a second and French gave a quick nod. Corey took French's old spot on the love seat beside Tyler. Tyler leaned over, his elbows on his knees. His heart was still racing. He could feel the heat radiating from Corey. He hadn't seen his brother-in-law mad very often, but this may have been beyond simply being mad. Corey's hand shook. He tried to speak, but only a broken breath came out. He looked from side to side, choosing not to look at Tyler. Hey, listen, Tyler started, hesitantly tapping Corey's bicep. It's not that big of a deal, he said. Corey exploded to his feet with a growl. You just what? You making deals with dope dealers? You taking handouts from a nigga like Howard who has as many bodies as he does kids? Corey, it wasn't like that, Tyler protested. Corey sat back down and frowned. His eyes were dark and his lips grew tighter. Tell me, he growled. I was home during my first semester of law school and I ran into him at the rec center. He started. I was telling him about school and he told me to come through for dinner. He continued. Corey sat back and crossed his arms. His shoulders were tense and his eyes burned. He told me that we could have some quid pro quo, you know? Corey released a long-held breath he didn't realize he was holding. So what did you owe him? Tyler clasped his hands and looked at the floor. Then he looked back at Corey's flushed face. Basically, I would defend him pro bono, he said as shame seeped out with his words. He'd pay for law school. Before Corey could respond, Tyler came with more explanation. We figured it was like he had hired me in advance. And yeah, he did dirt. But everybody needs defense, right? Corey got back up and walked to the pool table where he crouched over. He let out another groan. Tyler rose from his seat and joined him. I just didn't want to burden y'all. The debt, though, it was crushing me, Tyler said. I should have said something. I was going to have to drop out. Corey looked up at Tyler and wiped his eyes. And now that he's dead, what's the deal with the debt? Tyler's red-rimmed eyes sunk in. He leaned back on the table and crossed his arms. I don't know, he said. Corey dropped his head again. He only had one more question. He dreaded releasing it into the atmosphere. Who else knew? Tyler looked at the doorway for a moment and then met Corey's gaze. I don't know, he said. Jesus, Ty. Basically, you made a deal to become a consigliere. You seen The Godfather. You the young black Tom Hagen. Tyler shook his head, staring at his feet. Well, it doesn't matter now. He's in the ground. Tyler said softly. Debts don't die, Corey said. Ain't nothing free. Tyler put both hands over his face and dragged them raggedly down, stretching his bottom eyelids before releasing. Just keep your head on a swivel, Corey said, his hand on Tyler's back. Me and Angie always got you, bro. Always. We can't fix everything, but you're never a burden, Corey said, putting a firm hand on Tyler's shoulder. Mike poked his head in and looked around until he saw Corey and Tyler. He softly cleared his throat. Angie kicked us out of the living room. She said we ain't gotta leave, but you gotta get the hell up out of here, Tyler finished. A smile settled over his face. French lurked in behind Mike. Let's bust some spades, he said. The men agreed to a game of spades as the main event of their evening. When French found the cards, they sat atop Howard's obituary. He stared down at Howard's picture, a face he'd seen regularly, wearing a smile that he rarely saw. French grunted as he looked at the dates. Howard Dodson, 1986 to 2025. He put his thumb over the 2025 and pressed down. Frenchie, bring the damn cards and stop beating your meat, Mike blurted out. French gave a dry chuckle and mumbled under his breath. This nigga. He lifted his finger from the obituary and it stuck just long enough to fall from his hand and flutter to the floor. 7, French growled, looking at his hand. I'm catching 7 books. Me and Mike out the back door. Yeah, Frenchie. Relax, Corey said, arranging his cards. I bid 5. What you got, Ty? Tyler stared at his cards. The numbers blurred. He kept thinking about the money Howard gave him. That was a house. That was college tuition for at least 3 of those kids Howard wasn't claiming. Ty, Corey snapped. Bid. 2, Tyler mumbled. I got a possible 2. Possible? French laughed, leading with the ace of diamonds. Man, make your bid. You playing with panties on. Mike threw a low diamond. Corey followed suit. Tyler played his king, taking the first book. I just keep thinking, Tyler said, gathering the cards. That money, that was for his kids. The ones y'all said he didn't claim. I took food out their mouths. You ain't take shit? Mike said quickly, shifting in his seat. He looked at the ceiling, then the TV, avoiding eye contact. Howard made his choices. If he wanted them kids to eat, he would have fed them. Mike pulled a card, hesitating. He was not interested in discussing people's parental responsibilities. Besides, Mike said, his voice pitching up a little, Howard ain't worried about tuition no more. Not after what happened. Tyler lit with a heart. He got stuck like a pig, Mike said, throwing a heart down. Howard was a big-ass dude, like 240, 250. That ain't no easy takedown. How he let somebody get in his grill like that? French watched the cards fall. He didn't have any hearts. He pulled a spade, the 10, and slapped it on the pile. I cut that, French said calmly, taking the book with the spade. Tyler flinched at the word cut. You gotta let people get close to get bled by 'em, French said, raking the cards toward his pile. Howard got comfortable. Thought he was untouchable. You think it was a woman? Corey asked, throwing his next card. Probably, French grinned. Or maybe just somebody tired of living under his thumb. Howard liked to hold things over people's heads. Could have been OG. Shit. Dwayne might have got involved. French didn't look up, focused on his hand. Debts. Favors. Secrets. You squeeze a man tight enough, eventually he pops. French glowered at Tyler as he spoke. Tyler felt the room shrinking. Sudden claustrophobia descended upon him. The bourbon churned in his stomach. Corey, can you change this track? Tyler blurted out. This beat is giving me a headache. You good? Corey asked. Bathroom, Tyler said, scraping his chair back against the floor. I'll be right back. He rushed out of the room, past the bar, and into the small hallway bathroom he had become so familiar with this evening. He closed the door and bent over the porcelain sink, taking deep breaths. He splashed cold water on his face, gasping for air. French. Did he? Nah, no way. Tyler grabbed a hand towel and buried his face in it. He took 3 more deep breaths, counting them like he did before a cross-examination. 1, 2, 3. He lowered the towel. In the mirror, the door behind him opened. Tyler turned, and the towel dropped to the linoleum floor. French was standing there. He hadn't made a sound. He stepped inside and closed the door, clicking the lock. The small space forced them to stand only inches apart. Relax, counselor, French whispered. The hell you doing? Tyler scooted back against the sink. Why you up in my shit? You told me about the debt, French interrupted, his voice low and gravelly. You told me Howard owned you, that he was going to use you to wash his money. I needed to get it off my chest, Tyler stuttered. And I was here for you, like a big brother's supposed to be, French said. He took a step closer, the smell of his premium cologne and the metallic odor of his gun filling the small space. And now it's done. You ain't got to worry about that nigga no more. Tyler's blood ran cold. You killed him. French didn't blink. Don't question it. Opportunity arose. I took it. Now it's your turn to take it. It's square biz. I didn't ask you to do that, Tyler hissed, his voice trembling. I didn't want him dead. I don't want that on me. It ain't on you. French smiled, that same devious expression. But understand something. The debt ain't disappear. What's that law of physics or something? Shit can't be created or destroyed. It just changed shape. French lifted his chin and gave a menacing stare, catching his own reflection behind Tyler. You don't owe Howard no more, but you walked away with a law degree paid for by the streets. Charge it to the game. French reached out and patted Tyler's cheek. His hand was heavy. I don't need a lawyer today, Ty, but one day, I might. And when I call, you gonna pick up? French unlocked the door and stepped back. Pull your thong up. We need to get back in there. Tyler stood frozen against the sink for a full minute after French left, and he felt sick. He had traded the dead master for a living monster. When Tyler finally walked back into the man cave, the vibe had shifted. The music was off. Mike was counting up the score on a napkin. We set you, French announced as Tyler walked in. Y'all went backwards. Minus 40. French stood up and stretched, his shirt rising just enough to show the handle of the pistol again. I'm calling it, French said, looking at Corey. I'm up early tomorrow. Got new business to handle. Already? Mike asked when we just started. Quit while you're ahead, French said, his eyes sliding over to Tyler. Right, Ty. Tyler couldn't speak. He just nodded. Corey stepped over and gripped French with one hand and pulled him in for a hug. Keep your nose clean, bro. I don't want to see you laid up like Howard, Corey whispered into his ear. French nodded and took a step back. He looked around the room, taking in how his friend was living. I received that, he said. I'm trying to get like you. French walked by Tyler, who was standing at the bar with a bottle of water. He hung limp in place, his face loose and pale. French playfully punched him in the shoulder. Hit me up before you leave tomorrow, Tylenol, he said. Tyler gave a half-hearted nod as French began down the hall where he passed Angie. She stepped through the threshold and saw Tyler standing by the bar. Mike was collecting the playing cards while Corey stacked the dishes onto the serving tray. I love a man who cleans up after himself, she said with a light smile. Tyler went from pale to green. Sweat began to form over his forehead and a salty flavor coated his mouth. He slapped his hand over his mouth and bolted out of the room. He could never hold his liquor, she said. Corey, Keena is asking for you. Corey put the tray down. The plates and glasses clattered softly. He walked over to his wife and put his arms around her and squeezed her tight before laying a soft kiss on her waiting lips. Such a good daddy, Angie said as he went to go see to his daughter's needs. Angie looked up and saw Mike standing by the end table collecting a glass French left earlier that evening. He reached for the glass, but instead grabbed a picture of Keena and Sheena. He slowly lifted the shiny gold frame. He surveyed the twin girls, their beaming smiles and innocent eyes. His heart fluttered for a beat, and his eyes briefly became wet. He released a stifled breath that had caught in his lungs and sniffled softly. They're good girls, Mikey. Mike turned around and saw Angie standing only a couple of feet behind him. She put a hand on the small of his back and took the frame, softly placing it on the table. She looked up at Mike and gave a weary smile. She patted him on the chest and walked away. Mike grabbed the empty glass and took another glance at the children's photo. A somber smile met his lips before he walked away, leaving the empty glass on the tray of discarded dishes. The end. Thank you for walking these streets with me. From shadows to the block is a world woven from these lives and desperate moments. None of them exist alone. Every story here echoes into the next. I'll see you in the shadows.